Welcome in Dr. Brian Sokalsky of the Jersey Shore Sports Medicine in Ocean City. We speak to him on a monthly basis for Glory Days magazine, get some great insight into sports injuries, preventative methods, treatments, and all that kind of stuff. So he gives us some great advice throughout the year to our readers. Wanted to bring him on board as we get into the high school baseball and softball seasons. Talk a little bit about arm injuries. Good morning, Brian.
Morning, Dave. How are you?
Hey, pretty good. Thanks for joining us so early on your weekend. Sorry to bother you on your day off, or is it a day? You ever have a day off when you're a doctor?
Oh, not really. Especially when you have your own business.
There you go.
You know all about that.
Yeah, sure. There's always somebody calling you, I'm sure.
There's always something going on.
Sure. Let's get into. Obviously, we're in the preseason here for high school baseball and softball. And, you're talking about basically a 3-week span before they start playing games. In your experience, what are the most common things you run into in terms of sports injuries, and how can some of these young men and women try to prevent some of the things that might occur throughout the season?
Well, when you're talking about throwers, both baseball and softball, obviously it's shoulder issues. And this time of year during the preseason, it's usually tendinitis of the rotator cuff. And it's mostly because they haven't done their preseason conditioning, and their shoulders just aren't ready for the volume of throwing they have to do to get ready for the season in just that short 3-week span.
You mean 15-year-olds don't follow the off-season workouts?
I know, it's shocking that they don't listen to their coaches and parents.
Right. I know when I was in high school, you were kind of on your own in terms of the off-season program. I was lucky to have an older brother I could throw with throughout the fall and winter. But even still, you might get those little twinges in your elbow, and maybe you threw a little bit too hard one day. I guess none of that is really too concerning. At what point does it become concerning to say a pitcher or even an infielder or outfielder? When you're talking about this age group.
Yeah, that's always one of the bigger challenges for an athlete, is knowing what's soreness and what's a real injury. And there are a couple of, it's hard to tell, but there are a couple of clues. One is the type of pain you have. If it's just kind of an ache and it's there for a day or two and goes away, that's usually just some muscle soreness or a real minor strain. But if you get more of a sharp pain, a pain with a specific movement, or pain that lasts for a week, 2 weeks, and doesn't get any better, that's usually a more significant injury that needs to be looked at.
What would you say is the most common injury for high school pitchers, say for instance in baseball? Does it tend to be the elbow or the labrum or the rotator cuff?
In this age group, it's more typically pretty evenly split between the shoulder and the elbow. And it's more of an overuse issue, particularly, nowadays it's not just high school that these kids are playing. They've got their travel team, they've got AAU, they're playing year round. So in this age group, it's typically more of an overuse injury, so more of a tendinitis type in the shoulders, the rotator cuff, in the elbow, particularly for pitchers. It's more of a epicondylitis or golfer's elbow for a more general term.
Now, I might be a little bit of the old school. When I was in high school, maybe we just didn't know any better. I really never iced my arm in my life and never really had any arm trouble. I'm not sure if that was because I did throw a lot, throughout the year with my brother, or what does icing do, and is that necessary? How do you feel on that situation? You see these guys with giant ice packs on their shoulders and elbows after games. What's the theory behind the icing?
Yeah, the theory is that after you use your shoulder, your elbow, particularly pitching, there's some inflammation after use, and so the icing decreases that, which will help prevent injuries such as tendinitis. But recently there's been some research coming out that's saying icing really doesn't do anything, and if anything, it may harm the shoulder and elbow. So it's actually a pretty interesting debate that's going on in the literature right now. And some people are moving away from icing, but obviously just watch, the pros and even the college guys, and as soon as they're off the mound and in the dugout, they've got ice on it after a game. So hasn't been fully accepted yet. So it's really a debate, but the general idea is to decrease inflammation and in turn decrease injury.
So I was ahead of my time then.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. You didn't even know it.
Either that or I didn't throw hard enough to hurt my arm, which is probably more the case.
Always a possibility.
What about softball? That's a unique kind of arm action where they're going windmill, underhand. I guess a lot more the shoulder. What can a high school girl do to kind of prevent any type of arm injuries? Because when you're talking about girls that age, they're still kind of developing in terms of their upper body strength. When you're talking about 14, 15, 16-year-old girls, what can they do to kind of keep their arm safe? And should there be any kind of innings limit on a softball pitcher? I know baseball pitchers tend to have pitch counts and inning limits and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and even though it's a different motion, like you said, there's a lot less stress on the elbow, more so on the shoulder. But there are similar recommendations as far as pitch counts, inning counts for softball. They're a little bit more relaxed than baseball because of the different motion, but they still do exist. And following those recommendations, obviously, is an easy first step. And then along the same lines as baseball, it's preseason conditioning, getting the arm stronger, getting the upper body and the core stronger. A lot of people don't realize that even though the throwing motion seems to be all arm, a lot of the strength's derived from the legs, as you know, and you got to get the power from the legs up to the arm, and the way you do that is through core strength. And a lot of people ignore that, and with a weak core, you end up using your arm more, which results in more overuse injuries or stress injuries to the arm. So a good off-season conditioning program, and then easing into the season with limiting throws and keeping a close eye on how much throwing is being done in practice, and again looking at how many leagues they're playing, how many practices a week, how many games a week they're playing, are all ways to avoid injury.
We're talking with Dr. Brian Sokalsky of the Jersey Shore Sports Medicine in Ocean City. Doc, a question I had, which was kind of on my mind, you see a lot of these days where these teams are, they'll practice for 2 weeks here in New Jersey where it's maybe 35, 40 degrees. They try to get outside as much as possible. And then all of a sudden you take a trip down to Florida for a week, it's 80 degrees. You come back, it's 40 again. Does that have any effect on pitchers, especially, and a lot of these teams, they're trying to get as many games as possible in Florida, so they might play 10 games in 5 days, and you're trying to fill up all those innings. How does that affect, the weather when you're going from cold to warm weather and back to cold? Does that have any effect on the arm? The temperature differential and weather changes don't have a specific effect on the arm. The problem is, as you remember being in high school, and I remember playing. I wasn't a baseball player, but I played sports throughout high school. It's the mentality of a high school kid. You just want to go out and start playing, and particularly when you're in Florida, it's a lot easier to warm up when it's 80 degrees out compared to 35 degrees. So when they come back from Florida and they're back in the 40, 50 degree weather, it's just very important to get out early before practice or before the game and get a good warm up in to really loosen up those muscles. So that's really the biggest focus, is getting a good warm up to get the body ready for practice or the game. So what are some real quick 2-3 tips that parents can look out for? They're obviously concerned about their son or daughter's health and injury risk. What can they be on the lookout for, and maybe say, okay, it's time to take a look at this kid's arm and see if there's something that's not right?
So by far, number one, and what I see most frequently is prevention, and that's monitoring volume of throws. For all players, but definitely the pitchers. And it's not just pitch count. It's pitch count across leagues, and then it's what are they doing when they're not pitching? Are they playing shortstop and getting a number of throws and warm ups before before each inning? And besides that, it's keeping an eye out how the player's behaving day to day. If they just have a little muscle soreness, you're really not going to see any change in the way they carry things and the way they do their day-to-day activities. But if they've got a significant injury, you're going to see them favoring their arm. So people throw with their dominant arm. They tend to do a lot of things with their dominant arm. including things as simple as eating. And so if you see them favoring that arm, maybe shifting and doing things with their off arm, that might be a sign that it's a more significant injury that needs to get looked at.
Good stuff, Brian. Appreciate you taking a few minutes. How can people get in touch with you if they want to get your advice on some injuries and want to get looked at?
They can always go to my website, jerseyshore-sportsmedicine.com, or if they have any questions or would like to make an appointment, they can call our office at 609-545-8553.
Good stuff. Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it. And we'll check in with you throughout the year.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
All right. Have a good weekend. Thanks.
Thanks.
That was Dr. Brian Sokalsky. Does some great work for Glory Days Magazine, giving us some great advice on sports injuries. So always nice to check in with him at the beginning of seasons and kind of give parents some advice as to what to watch out for.